Is brought to you by In the Know with Wealth Management Group, hosted by Craig Bolanos. Heard Sunday mornings at 10.
Tickets for Freedom Summit Chicago are on sale now at freedomsummitchicago.com. That's freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Mad Money Jim Cramer last week. We talked about it. They were roundtabling this discussion of the Wall Street business execs and the larger corporate community, how nervous they are about the prospect of an Elizabeth Warren as the Democrat Socialist Party nominee. This story from CNBC this week following up on that. Democrat donors on Wall Street and in big business preparing to sit out the presidential campaign fundraising cycle or even back Trump if Warren wins the party's nomination. In recent weeks, CNBC spoke to several high-dollar Democrat donors and fundraisers in the business community. And this is worth noting, by the way. Republicans synonymous with, and conservatives in particular, synonymous with big business? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. The paper pushers and the rent seekers in Fortune 1000 C-suites and on Wall Street are leftists. Yeah, with few exceptions. CNBC speaking to these leftists and finding that they would love to help the party, as one private equity exec said. You're in a box because you're a Democrat and you're thinking, I want to help the party, but she's going to hurt us, so I'm going to help Trump. Now, I don't know how this will impact how Democrats think about who their nominee is going to be, but it provides great fodder for Elizabeth Warren to continue to prosecute her populist case in the primary, that's for sure. Similarly, big tech. Are they getting mugged by the reality of the policies and policymakers they've supported and continue to support to a large extent? We talked about this a little bit over the last week with California Governor Gavin Newsom signing a bill that will force Uber, Lyft, Postmates, share economy companies built around part-time contractual employees, will require them to treat all their employees as employees, full-time employees. That's going to be a real problem for their business model. For more on the topic as it pertains to Silicon Valley, we're pleased to be joined by Joel Kotkin, who is a contributing editor at City Journal. He's also the author of The Human City, Urbanism for the Rest of Us. Joel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, how about, and I love your comparison to the French Revolution, too. We love the Jacobins until they come for us. Is that what's happening in Silicon Valley?
Well, I think a lot of what's happened is, I've been basically a Democrat most of my life. I'm now an independent, but fundamentally what's happened is the Democratic Party used to have a role for sort of pragmatic, business-oriented people who nevertheless, shared some basic ideas of the Democratic Party. I think what's happened is that as the tech guys and the Wall Street guys have pumped more and more money into the Democratic Party and have supported the nonprofits and the sort of progressive agenda, all of a sudden they're realizing that agenda is getting out of control, and that they and frankly, I'm very sympathetic to, in some senses, to what, let's say, they say with the Green New Deal. If you're going to have a mass, if you believe, which I don't particularly, that you have to have this radical change overnight, well, why should working class and middle class people pay the price for it? And so that's part of what's going on, is that the environmentalists who are supported largely by the tech guys, they've been pushing an agenda that is very, very difficult. We can see it in California among minorities, among immigrants, among young people. And so they've been pushing this agenda, and now suddenly even their own employees are saying, by the way, why am I making $80,000 a year working 50 hours, 60 hours a week, while some investor is making billions of dollars off what I'm doing? I mean, once you start opening that discussion, people start to say, there's something wrong here. Or like my favorite is, when you have people saying, well, we have to cut back on our lifestyles, and people shouldn't fly and they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that. Oh, by the way, I'm taking my private jet to the Google conference on climate change. And I'm saying, what?
Yeah.
But you mentioned in your article that in the 1980s and 90s, Silicon Valley, like many industries, placed its bets on both political parties. Can you explain?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to remember I go back to starting covering Silicon Valley in 1975. So you're talking now over 40 years. In those days, Silicon Valley was certainly not conservative in the sort of southern sense of conservative, but was kind of your practical, in many ways, kind of Midwestern, pragmatic conservative, moderately liberal. And the Democrats who got elected tended to be moderately liberal, and and many of the Republicans were sort of, there were people like Tom Campbell, Ed Schau, before them Pete McCloskey, who were Republicans, but were not far right Republicans. And now what you see is that the combination of the Greens, the public employee unions, and some developers who sort of want to make sure that nobody can live anywhere but in a dense apartment that they rent. Those groups have coalesced behind the Democratic Party, and the old sort of practical side of Silicon Valley has sort of been wiped out. The Silicon Valley representatives tend to be pretty far left, and it'll be very interesting. I mean, even in where I live in Orange County, our district has our congressperson is a Elizabeth Warren person. Well, this is a fairly affluent district. I'm wondering whether people understand that, that if Elizabeth Warren comes in, they're going to be paying, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more in taxes, of which they will get virtually no benefit.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems to me like you're in agreement with Peter Thiel, the billionaire tech investor's assessment of Silicon Valley and why he finds what's going on there so disturbing. Because frankly, people like Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey and some of the other lesser influentials that have been drummed out of places like Google and Facebook, seemingly for their political beliefs, not their work performance, how just intolerant and silly the place has become to its detriment.
Well, and also part of it is money. I mean, just when you mentioned the French aristocracy, when you're living it up and you're at the very high levels and your feet really never touch the ground, you can have all sorts of crazy ideas. And also, if you're Tom Steyer and you made a fortune in fossil fuels and in minerals, and now you're wealthy beyond any need that you'll ever have or your family will ever have, then you can decide to become possessed by a crusading spirit because fundamentally it doesn't affect you.
Yeah, there was who was I think it was a Forbes columnist. I'm blanking on who it was exactly, but basically said hypocrisy is the point for these people because what it signals is the rules don't apply to me. I can do a 180. I can go make $1 billion in fossil fuels, and then I can say we need to completely deindustrialize our economy and ban fossil fuels in the next decade. That hypocrisy means is an indicator that I play by a different set of rules than the hoi polloi.
Well, that's exactly what you have now. And so one of the things I find really disturbing is I go to let's say a place like Texas and I see, because the policies are more pro-business and so people can build, let's say, townhomes for young people who could buy, let's say in West Houston for $175 and still have job opportunities. In California, to get that kind of price, you have to literally be living in the middle of the desert because and not near anything. I mean, we've created policies that are terrible for families, for the middle class, for the working class in particular. And what I wonder about is, as I am not a Trump supporter at all, but I've got to ask these people, You think it's going to be better if the price of gasoline, let's say, I don't know what it is in Illinois. Here it's hitting $4 a gallon at a time with low gas prices. Now, look, it doesn't affect me. I ride my bike to a lot of places. I don't have to commute a huge amount. But, boy, if I lived in, let's say, Riverside, California, and had to go to Long Beach every day, it would be ruinous.
Yeah, right.
Well, you have to
regressive
carpool.
tax.
Yeah, well, you're lucky you don't live here because our gas tax just increased twofold.
Yeah, well.
Really? Well, I mean, the interesting thing for the Democratic Party is they seem to have taken California more or less as their model. And, of course, part of the thing is one thing California has that let's say, Illinois doesn't, is we do have Silicon Valley. So there is a pot of money which, at least temporarily, can paper over things. You don't really have that. But states are taking positions, like, for instance, for Beto O'Rourke to start talking about banning fracking, and he's in Texas. Like, you really ever think he can ever run again? I mean,
for all kinds of reasons. Yeah.
And so what seems to have happened is the Democratic Party sort of lost its mind. I mean, I think that's a lot of it, and I think that even among my friends, let's say at the New York Times, who are fairly liberal, they're terrified by the 20-somethings who are, pushing an agenda that they know the vast majority of the population doesn't want.
Well, so it seems to me it used to be like with Wall Street and big tech. I know you got to beat us up. Those guys saying to the Dem politicians, I know you got to beat us up and play politics with us. No big deal. But wink, wink, nod, nod. We're all on the same team. We'll help out, and you're not going to go over the edge with respect to regulating us or preventing us from developing technology, improving our business, making money, so forth. Is that changing at all? I guess would be my question. Or are Google and Facebook still all in to allegedly manipulate searches to benefit whoever Trump's opponent is? Are they starting to say, well, wait a second, they really are coming for us and there's no more wink, wink, nod, nod?
It's hard to say. There may be a division between the upper management people, who have a lot to lose, and the employees. The problem that Silicon Valley has, and to some extent Hollywood to a somewhat lesser extent, is you're living in that particular soup. You're living in a world where there is no alternative to progressivism. There is no debate. Universities have become, pretty much lockstep. I mean, they, and particularly the more elite universities. So they're really, I really think that these companies themselves have a problem because they've got a huge group of people who know they can never buy a house. Many of whom, feel they can never really start a family. So they adopt a different point of view. It's like I always tell my conservative friends: if you have economics that mean that you can never buy a house, you'll never achieve a middle class quality of life, you'll always be dependent on subsidies. Well, why not? Why shouldn't they vote for Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders? There's nothing for them to gain from this system that we have now, and a lot of people, I think that's what they feel. And remember, they've come out of a university system that is literally a re-education camp.
He is Joel Kotkin, contributing editor at City Journal, author of The Human City, Urbanism for the Rest of Us. Joel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
That was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM